I'm Bill Wolf. I'm a mastering engineer. We're here in my mastering studio in Alexandria, Virginia. Over the years, I've done recording and mixing, as well as mastering. I've been mastering full-time since 1996. What really brought me to it was when computer-based mastering became possible. Originally, of course, everything was vinyl, and I would follow many of my projects through to the vinyl mastering stage. I learned that the final product could be dramatically affected by what happened in mastering, and so I learned to do it. I've had the pleasure of working with many excellent musicians: the Grateful Dead, Willie Nelson, David Grisman, Bruce Springsteen. I enjoyed working on Nils Lofgren's 9-disc compilation. That was very rewarding to revisit his contributions to music over the years. The Tommy Emmanuel projects, of course, he's a superlative musician, and they were very enjoyable. I've been using Nuendo since 2000. It always sounded warmer to me than other DAWs. Wavelab is my first choice for mastering. I've been with it since Wavelab 3. I've mastered thousands of projects in Wavelab. It's a complete program that allows you to take the mixes to a final release product, whether it be MP3, podcast, CD, streaming, and it's one of the few programs that allows complete control. The audio engine in all the Steinberg products has always been a leader. Over the years, the sound has gotten better and better, and I still think it sounds better than any playback engine I've heard. I got won over early on by the functionality. The use of the montage has always been essential for my work. It's fast, it's obvious. You can isolate a clip within a song and process it individually, inserting individual plugins or stacks of plugins that can be recalled and used again later in the piece if the same problem occurs. Wavelab offers the option of inserting analog gear into the master section. I will first use master section to do some preliminary sculpting, then dither to 24-bit, send it to the Horus. Horus also captures the analog output of the analog chain and returns it to Wavelab. Additional output processing: the Shadow Hills Industries mastering compressor, the Chandler curve bender, dangerous monitoring. The loudspeakers are Myers with Atom sub on each side, 2 subs. The main meters I use are the loudness meter for checking peak and RMS, also the bit meter as a check for the source file to be sure that once I've applied dither that it's where I want it. I also use the phase scope, which lets me know about out-of-phase material in the sides visually, and it can be a useful tool. If something doesn't sound right, it'll show up on the phase scope. The new Spectrum editor in Wavelab 9.5 offers some fantastic tools. One of the things that I'm called upon to do a lot is de-squeaking of guitars. The Spectrum editor makes that easy and obvious. It's a very powerful tool. One of the nice things that comes with Wavelab 9.5 is the standalone DDP player. It's a tool that you can actually send to the client so that he can audition his product as a DDP, which means the spacing, the sound that will be on the final product. Wavelab has been an essential part of my mastering career. I certainly recommend that any up-and-coming mastering engineer try it out, listen, look at all the possibilities it offers. I've stayed with Wavelab since version 3 because it offers the most features for CD mastering on a PC of software I could find. It allows complete control over the final product.
Hello everyone and welcome to Steinberg Sessions. Before we get started, I just want to take this opportunity to recognize that today, September 30th, is Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada. And I hope that we've all had a moment today to reflect on Canada's history and hear our Indigenous friends' voices loudly, not only today, but every day going forward. And I hope that as Canadians, we can, and citizens of the planet, we can be better allies for the Indigenous community in the future. Okay, so how many of you checked out that amazingness that happened last week with the Yamaha 440 Sessions return to live streamed concert? I'm still riding the wave and the high of what an amazing week that was. We invited all of our friends from across the country to play shows, and it was all about music. And wow, if you didn't check it out, you sure missed out on something that was pretty cool. And if you did, you can go back and watch it again, because I know I've watched all those, even though I was sitting behind the controls. I watched all those shows a whole bunch of times. So anyway, please check that out. It's on Facebook and it's on YouTube as well. We've archived them there, and wow, amazing shows. So anyway, for those that are new, I'm going to send you over here to our Yamaha Canada Solutions Facebook page. That's where you get all the information about everything that's coming up. And dun, 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 you know, just because we did a week of concerts doesn't mean we're going to stop doing the Y440 sessions. So I just wanted to let you know that we've got another one coming in a couple of weeks. 2 Thursdays from tonight we'll be doing one, and we'll be focused on how to optimize your mix using the Yamaha TF console. So I hope that you'll tune in for that. All right, without further ado, I say that a lot, don't I? Anyway, moving forward, tonight's topic. We had the little video on mastering, because even though I'm not specifically going to talk about mastering, because I really feel that when you finish a mix, it's in everyone's best interest to consult your local mastering engineer. We have so many amazing mastering engineers here in Canada and around the world. And I think your music is best served by sending it out to a mastering engineer. However, there are times where budget doesn't permit, or we just don't have the availability of a mastering engineer on a tight deadline, and we have to do something ourselves. So everything that we're going to talk about tonight, it falls under optimizing the 2 mix. For those that aren't familiar with the term 2 mix, I just mean your stereo mix that you hear through your headphones and that comes out of the meters on Cubase. And so optimizing the 2 mix, it basically just means my mix is done, and how am I going to make my track sound the best that it can sound? Give it a little polish, give it that kind of finished sound that we all know and love from listening to commercially released tracks. So it's also known as basic home mastering, but again, call your mastering engineer. You'll be happier that you did. I've done some mastering of my own work myself, and I've had mixed results. Some of it I've been very happy with, and some of it I haven't been happy with. And frankly, I've had tracks sent out to mastering engineers that I've been happy with and not so happy with as well. So it can kind of go both ways, but I think 99% of the time you're going to love the result that a mastering engineer is going to give you. But let's talk about what they do, shall we? So I have a mix here. This is an old one. I did this one before, and you guys may have even heard this track before. We may have broken it down already, but I brought it back because it's just kind of a good middle-of-the-road pop track with some keyboards and some guitars and some vocals and all the kind of instruments that we might use. It's by my buddies in the Doyle Brothers from New York City, now LA. I think Ryan just moved to Los Angeles. So this is called Anything Everything. So why don't we just have a listen to the mix, just as it is. There's nothing on this. And I'm going to pull up the supervision here so we can kind of check out what's going on while we're listening frequency-wise, because that's where we're going to start. We're going to start by kind of correcting any frequency things that need correcting. So here we go. Let's have a listen to Anything, Everything.
Not the same. Hey, go, whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'll forget you, baby, alone. Hey, go, anything, everything leads me back to you. Anything, everything leads me back to you. Expatriate moonlight inspires my game. I'm fighting the good fight, but just know you're my tame. Hey, go, whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'll forget you, baby, alone. Hey, go, anything, everything leads me back to you. Anything, everything leads me back to you. Over my head. I'm going away again. I'm pretty please. Don't ask me to stay. Oh no. Over my head. I'm going away again. Pretty please. Pretty please. Hey, go, whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'll forget you, baby, alone. Hey, go, anything, everything leads me back to you. Hey, hey, go, whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'll look at you, baby, alone. Hey, go, anything, everything leads me back to you. Anything, everything leads me back to you. Anything, everything leads me back to you.
Okay, cool. So it actually on the spectrum curve here, it actually looks pretty good, especially in the top end. If I play it, you can see things are very level. There's nothing that's kind of poking out there that's unusual or whatever. So that's pretty good. If anything, it's sort of the top is rolled off a little bit. So we might want to add a teeny bit of sparkle to make it a little brighter. And then if we listen through again, we notice that I've actually chopped off a bunch of the extreme low end here, probably for punch, but we might want to just add a little bit more bottom, because the best shape for the spectrum curve on a finished master sort of in the low frequencies is higher, and it kind of slopes down. It's kind of like a pink noise curve. So we kind of want things to look like it's going down the slope. That's sort of the goal here. So other than that, and the reason we listen to the whole song is because we want to make sure that we know, we don't want to just sort of set it up for one section of the song and have that sound really good, and then in another section of the song it doesn't sound good at all. So we just wanted to kind of take a survey of all the sections and see what's happening. So what I'm noticing here is that there's a lot of information that's kind of poking up here, sort of somewhere between around 550 and 750. There seems to be a lot of stuff. Around 320, 330, there seems to be, in the low mids, there seems to be a lot of information. And the only place in the upper mids that I sort of noticed that things would poke out a little bit there is around 5 or 5.3 specifically. So those are the areas that I'm going to target specifically when we get into this. So let's just have a listen one more time just to a little bit of it, and we'll see if we can see those areas being a little bigger than other areas. So you can see here's the 330, 320, it's a little thick through there. That's a frequency that can make things sound a little muddy, so we want to take care of that. And you can see up in here, there's a lot of energy up in here. And yeah, down here around 50, we could probably bump it up a little bit. So, okay, so let's go to the mixer here. And how I've got this set up is I've got the track, and I've set up 3 groups with 3 different possible approaches to how we might do this. And so from the track, this is the track here, I can set the output to one of these tracks, either 2 mix 1, 2 mix 2, or 2 mix 3, and then they're all going to my master bus. Another thing that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which is important, and actually it came up in that video at the beginning as well, is we also want to keep an eye on the Rms Max, and just playing through the track without any sort of 2 mix or basic mastering done, our RMS is about -18. Does anyone remember what it's supposed to be? If it's loud enough, it's probably around -10 to -8. So we're about 8 dBs down, sort of in the average level. We're going to want to fix that with compression and limiting in a few minutes. But and our peak max is not going above -0.3, so that's good. We're not actually going above 0. The track might be a teeny bit loud, and the reason I know this is because when I first pulled up this one, let's assign it to 3 for a sec. I've got some super fancy plugins in this channel, but in here when I was playing it, the clip light was lighting in the compressor a little bit, which I didn't like very much. So so I think the track is maybe a teeny bit loud, and the way I would handle that in here is I would go back to the track, and I would actually just use the clip automation on it. So click on the region here, and then using the volume, we could knock it down like, say, 4 dB. So let's do that, and I think that will help just make sure that we have enough headroom in our plugins. So back to our mixer window, and let's route it through the first channel, and let's look at basic stuff we can do just using the built-in Steinberg plugins, because they're pretty great. So as I said, where we're going to start is we're going to start with some corrective EQing. And this frequency plugin, which you know I've talked about this a whole bunch, is pretty fantastic for all kinds of stuff. So where did I talk about it? Well, I talked about it maybe around 50 hertz. So let's get ready for that one, and we can turn that band on. I also talked about there being a problem around 320, 330, so let's go for 325. So let's get ready there, and we're going to cut a little bit there. Then I talked about somewhere between, you know, 500 or 550 and 750. So why don't we just put that at around 650, and we'll go for there. And then the other frequency that I was sort of thinking needed a little bit of attention was around 5.3 K. Now, so that's that, and then I had talked about adding a teeny bit of sparkle in the top end. So that's at 18 hertz, and there's lots of ideas about how you can do that, but a little high up there is pretty good. So, so let's play the track, and let's start trying to see if we can make this thing sound a little bit better with those areas that we identified as being potentially problematic. Okay, so let's start by just adding, like, let's give it a 1.5 decibels on the bottom end. And let's make it a shelf. Okay, maybe a little more. Let's go to 2.5 dB. Now on the internet and on computer speakers, we probably won't hear that too much, but in this room I'm hearing a little bit of a difference that's making. And now let's go to this next frequency. So let's make it a little bit narrower because we don't want to take too much down there. You can hear it's a very boxy frequency, so let's take it out to about there, maybe a little wider. That cleans things up a little bit, okay? And now in these mid frequencies, because they were sort of all over the place, they were causing some issues, let's keep it relatively wide, just a bit of a smiley face mid cut. And then up here at 5.3, we're going to want this to be very narrow. And you can hear it's sort of that whistly, SE frequency that we want to deal with. So we could just take a little bit out there, and then in the top, let's maybe make this a bit lower. So it's a little duller. And then when we put this in, it's a little brighter. Now the key to your 2-mix settings or any kind of basic mastering your stuff you're doing, you don't want to do too much. If you have to cut and boost frequencies like 10 dB or anything like that, you should probably go back and have a look at your mix because there might be some problems in your mix. So that's typical of the type of thing that I would do on one of my mixes or even on a mix that someone else gives me to work on. It would be about that much stuff. Now, let's add a little bit of compression because, you know, as we talked about, we want to try to get this RMS average level up a bit. So here's my compressor. And generally for this stuff, we don't want to compress too much, but a higher ratio can sometimes be nice. So I've got this at 415. And let's just pull the threshold down. So right now we're getting a couple dB here. Okay, and of course we need to add, if we compress by 2 dB, we need to add 2 dB of makeup gain. And I've got the auto release on. Attack is fast. So if we take that out, so it's not doing a lot, but you can hear it is doing a lot. So there's not a lot of compression happening here, but we're actually able to make a pretty big difference to the track with just a couple dB. Okay, so now if we take everything off and just listen to the track as it was. Wow, lots of punch. Okay, final stage of a basic 2-mix is limiting, and this is where we're going to get most of the level. So we're hanging around minus 16 RMS right now. We've set our output here to minus 0.3 because we don't want the peak to go above minus 0.3. So we've set that here. And now all we do is we're just going to push the input up until we get the RMS where we want it. Moonlight inspires my game. I'm fighting the good fight, but just know you're my tame. Hey, go, whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'm fucking here pretty alone. Now, in the chorus, it's maybe a teeny bit hot. We might not, and we can hear it kind of compressing a lot, so we might want to back that off a little bit. The other thing that we'll find is that if we're hearing the compression too much, it could be our compression settings, which we'll look at in a second, or one of the things in mixes which is tricky, and this is why I had a lot of that extreme low end rolled off, is bass frequencies can really make a compressor work hard, and so we'll hear it, and so that could be something there too. So we might have added too much in the low frequency. So let's play it again with these settings, and let me make a couple of adjustments here just to see if we can make it sound less compressed.
Treated moonlight inspires my game.
So even making that
I'm fighting
adjustment
the good fight,
makes a pretty big
but
difference.
just know you're my tame. Hey, go, whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'm fucking here, baby, alone. Hey, go, everything leads me back to you.
And actually taking out a bit more of that mids and low mid stuff where all that energy was cleans it up a little bit as well. So let's look at our compressor settings here, and let's see if we can make an adjustment here. It might just be that the ratio is too hot here.
Treated moonlight inspires my game. I'm fighting the good fight, but just know you're my tame. Hey, go, whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'm fucking here.
Okay, and we just crossed over to our RMS over here is above 10 now. So we're in a pretty competitive level. Like if this was an actual master, we could work on this a little bit longer to try to make it louder. But I think that we made a huge improvement by just turning the ratio down. It was probably a little too high in terms of the ratio. Move the attack up a little bit. And that sort of corrected it with taking some of that extreme low out and cutting a little bit more of the mid energy, which was sort of causing it to react. So let's hear the before and after between these settings, just for fun one more time. So here it is, just the mix all by itself.
Treated moonlight.
And I'm not adjusting any levels within the system here. So you're here, the master level that you're hearing is staying the same.
But just know you're my tame.
Okay, so here's the chorus with nothing.
Whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'm fucking here, baby, alone.
And again, the key is you're seeing we're not going above minus 0.3 peak max, so there's no distortion. But our RMS went up significantly, like 8 decibels or whatever, so we're at a more competitive level. So using Steinberg plugins, that's a very, very quick way to go about it. Now, something that I know will come up if someone hasn't asked already in the questions, but we hear mastering engineers and we hear people talk about clipping all the time. And what clipping is when we allow our mix, we don't limit it at a peak max below 0 decibels full scale. We actually want it to go above 0 and clip. And basically all that information that goes above the top of the scale over here, right here, it just disappears. It's clipped, it's chopped off. And if you looked at the waveform, you'd see it's just flattened out. Now that can be a technique that mastering engineers use to get really loud masters. And it certainly works. And a lot of the music that you'll hear on your favorite streaming services or on the radio are clipped. So it's a legitimate practice. However, it's really difficult to do really, really well. And all the people that I know that do it really, really well, they have really high-end A to D converters, and they clip those sort of from an analog stage. And so it's a little bit more forgiving than if you just have digital clipping within the box. But feel free to experiment. You may find that it sounds amazing for your music, and who am I to tell you that you can't clip your work? However, I'm usually trying to preserve the integrity of the sonic qualities of the mix that I've done. So I use limiters, and I set it just below that. And whenever I get a master from a mastering engineer, even if they have clipped it, they've then turned it down to minus 0.2 or minus 0.3 or whatever they choose as the right amount of headroom. So, so you want to make sure that your final delivery is below the zero. Otherwise, it could potentially clip the DA converters on your phone or on your stereo system or whatever, and you don't want that. So even if you clip, make sure you bring the level back down. Okay. All right, so let's go to the second option. And this is a little more typical of what I use on my 2-mix when I'm mixing. And even though we're dealing with like a mix here, like a bounced mix, if I had the multi-track session here, this would be typical of what you would see on. So we're now running into the second one here. And same kind of thing, I would generally start with an EQ. And this is one of my new favorite EQs. I just really love this. It's made by Empirical Labs. It's the Big Freak. And it's sort of modeled off of their analog EQ, which was called the Little Freak. And but there's all kinds of extra features in this, which I'll show you in a second. But let's play around with this a little bit and try to get it sounding good in the same areas that we did with the other EQs. So here we go.
Treated moonlight inspires my game. I'm fighting the good fight.
So put that at 325. Now, here's one of the cool features of this EQ. So I've got my bandwidth control. I can make this wide or narrow, which I'll show you in a second, but I can also change the slope or the shape of the curve, and watch this. So I can make it a little bit more narrow, but watch what the slope control does. It sort of takes my bell curve and it kind of flattens it out so that you get a more even cut over a wider frequency range. And I find this so incredibly useful in all of my work. So this is something to check out for sure. Okay, so let's find the sweet spot on that. Okay, that sounds pretty good to me. Let's go for these mid frequencies. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And we had something happening at 5.3. Let's make it really narrow. Now, there's a couple other really interesting things about this plugin, and you'll hear a lot of mastering engineers or people that use saturation or distortion on their mixes, which sounds counterintuitive, but it can just add a lot of harmonic content that's really pleasing. And this is a cool part of this, is this has sort of a harmonic distortion component to it. So let's try turning the drive up on that just a little bit and see what it does. So that's an extreme setting. But there's a little bit of a presence boost. And we can change the oversampling so that it's a little higher quality. So it's doing kind of that nice thing that a lot of people were talking about, and I really like that a lot. Now, here's another cool part of this plugin is that the high shelf and the low shelf are very, very gentle, and they work over quite a large range. So we might be able to give a little bit of that high sparkle and a little bit of that low stuff that we were wanting to do on the other plugin with this. So let's try adding just a teeny little bit here. As you can see, it starts way down here, like around 3 or 4K. So that's maybe too much. Okay, so we've got that going. Now, so that would be typical of what I would do on my overall mix. Even before mastering, I might kind of try to make that curve look the way that I want it to. Now, the next thing that we have here, we're done with this one, so we can bring this one in. The next thing I might do is add a compressor, and this one, this UAD API 2500 is ridiculous. This thing just gives everything punch and makes it come forward a little bit, and I just love it so much. And I just use the preset in here, this mix glue, and just to adjust the threshold until I get it working as much as I want, which isn't a lot, but let's see if you can hear the difference with it on or off. So here it is off. So the needles are just kind of dancing a little bit here. I can show you what it sounds like extreme. So super transparent, super punchy, just does like a really cool thing. Okay, so that's typical of the amount of compression I would use, not too much, just needles just dancing a teeny little bit. So that's great. Now, the other thing that I like to do after compression is now I add a second EQ, and this is also a UAD. You'll find a Manley Massive Passive, and actually their Very compressor as well, which I have as a UAD plugin, but I just prefer the API one for what I do. But the Manley stuff you'll see in a lot of mastering studios, and boy, does it ever sound fantastic. It's pretty incredible sounding stuff. So, so I'll use this basically just to kind of tighten up the extreme high and low. It's got these really cool high and low pass filters that are very subtle, but they do a neat thing. And then I usually just use this to do a little bit of kind of sweetening EQ because it has this really sweet top and bottom end. So I'll usually put the high boost to shelf and a really high frequency like 16 and leave the bandwidth pretty wide, and then I'll just kind of add a little bit with this. So let's hear how this sounds. So I don't know if you can hear that over the internet, but it's this beautiful, sweet top end. So I'll maybe do a couple of decibels. And then to tighten it up, I may sort of use the low pass a little bit. And it's kind of even above like what we could probably hear with our ears, but it just does something to the track. And then I'll do the same thing with the low end. So little boost on a shelf. Let's put it down low like we had it before. And you can hear even cranked, it's super subtle. So let's just and then I'm going to tighten things up with this high pass a little bit. Okay, so around 16 or 23, which again is probably below what any of our speakers are doing, but there's a tightening that happens with it. So I just use this second EQ, and there's a lot of different EQs that you could use for this. The Rupert Neve Designs has a Portico plugin that I use for this sometimes, and I'm going to show you my new favorite one in a minute, but just a really high quality EQ and just sort of as a secondary sweetening. So the first EQ is corrective, then we compress a little bit just to try to get a bit more level out of it, and then a sweetening EQ. Now, one of the things that comes up when you listen to your own mixes versus stuff that's commercially released is oftentimes you think, why does the commercially released stuff sound so wide? It's so, like, it feels like it's like the left and right are outside of my speakers. And that's because we can use a widener. And technically what it does is it puts the center a little out of phase. So you want to be careful with this stuff because it can really harm your mix in a bad way. But it can be kind of nice to just subtly make things seem a little wider. But again, be careful. Pay attention to the stuff in the center of the mix, because you don't want your bass or your kick drum or your vocals, which are the important things down the middle, to disappear. So I like this Ozone Imager a lot because it's very simple and it's a one slider thing. So I can basically just widen my mix using this with this one slider. Or if I find that I panned everything too hard, I can actually make my mix seem more narrow too, which is kind of neat. So let's have a listen to this, and I'll take it to the extreme settings, and hopefully some of you have headphones on so you can hear what's happening. Anyway, here we go. So this is at 0, nothing's happening here. If I crank it to the extreme, you can hear that everything on the outside seems like a bigger deal. So there's 0 again, and just the stuff on the outside gets louder. And I can go the other way too. So here's 0 again, and let's go to the opposite. And as you can see on the meter here, everything is mono now. So if you're a big fan of Rick Rubin and some of those Red Hot Chili Peppers records from the 90s, and they were basically mono, you can also do this, have the same effect. If you have regrets about how much you've panned things, you can use something like this to make it super strong and right down the middle, which can be powerful for a lot of rock music as well. But let's find sort of a happy medium here where we make things a little bit wider without making them too crazy wide, and let's check out what that sounds like. Okay, so in my headphones, that's sounding a little bit wider, and again, if we turn it off, yeah, that just kind of spreads it out a little bit. Okay, so now as the last stage, we've got a limiter again, and this is the sound of popular music for many, many years now, the Waves L2 limiter. It came in hardware as well, and a lot of mastering engineers had the hardware version. Not a lot of people use this as their main limiter anymore, but it still works really well. There's an L3 as well, and there's an L1, which was the older one, and they all have a particular sound, but this one sounds like about 20 years of music. So you may recognize the sound, and it may give this mix sort of that sound that you're used to hearing on so many different things. So let's hear what it's doing. And again, I've set my ceiling to -0.3. This is on auto, and all I have to do is pull my threshold down until I can get my RMS up where I want it to be.
Inspires my game. I'm fighting the good fight, but just know you're my tame. Hey, go, whatever which way I go. Hey, go, I'm fucking keep pretty low. Hey, go, everything leads me back to you. Everything leads me back to you.
Okay, and I think you can hear right off the bat that with these kind of fancy schmancy plugins that I have, we're getting a cleaner result. As a matter of fact, let's A/B it. So let's go back to the first chain and have a listen to that.
Treated moonlight inspires my game.
So there's mix 1, and here's mix 2 with the stuff that we just did.
Treated moonlight inspires my game. I'm fighting the good fight.
So subtle, but slightly bigger, slightly more open sound, and you know, we've got a couple more tricks happening here with the harmonic distortion here, and we're doing a little bit more EQ, and we've got this extra sweetening EQ, and it's kind of nice, and we've got a little bit of widening happening as well. So there's a few extra tricks on this second mix, but we approached it kind of the same. So here's an example where the tools that you're using can actually make a huge difference to the overall sound. Not that there's anything wrong with these built-in Steinberg plugins. They're fantastic, and you can do an awful lot of stuff with them. But if you ever wondered why people like me have spent all this money on these extra things, it's for this. So anyway, so that's mix number 2. Now, as kind of the final thing to look at here, these are the next mix. These are extremely nice plugins, and they're a teeny bit expensive, although a couple of them are on sale right now if any of you are looking for plugins to mess with. And the modern way of making things wider isn't to use something like this Ozone Imager. The modern way to do it is to use what we call mid-side. And what mid-side does is it separates our mix into all the things that are down the middle, and side is all the things that are panned left and right. And so the technology has a way of allowing us to treat the center of the mix differently from the stuff that's on the sides. And I'll show you how to do that yet. I just got these plugins, so I haven't had loads of time to spend with them, but they're pretty fantastic even just on an initial thing. And the first one here is from Plugin Alliance, and this Amex Eq 200. This is based on the GML 8300, which is, just for those of you that have ever used a GML 8300 EQ in hardware form, it's a remarkably clean, powerful EQ that is pretty hard to argue with for anything. I used to rent them and record vocals with them because they sounded so incredible, but they're very, very expensive, like I don't even know, but like thousands of dollars. Anyway, so this is based on that, and also on a Soundtech EQ as well. And as you can see here, we have a mid-side switch, so we can change it from just a simple left-right to a mid-side thing. And so let's kind of have a listen to what this EQ sounds like, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the stuff. So let's start with EQ here, and I think we're done with this one. So let's get this supervision up, so if we need any reference here. Okay, so let's have a listen again and check out the Amex EQ 200. So we want to mess around down here. Same thing around 3. So let's go with that. So you can hear it's really precise. It's got a beautiful sound, and so let's just knock it down a little bit here. And we can change the bandwidth a little bit. Okay, let's start there. For the second band, let's go around 650, something like that. And so we can pull this out a little bit. Okay. Looks like I've already done it here. I put it on a very narrow bandwidth and I've got it at 5.3. Just taking out a bit, and this is a super sweet EQ for the top end for boosting. So we can boost a little bit here. But it's remarkable when you turn it on and off. It's like you can hear what it's doing, but it's so smooth and subtle. You can almost not hear it. So off, on, just cleans it up. It's so amazing. And we'll add a little bit of something in the bottom end here as well. So I think we were doing it around 50. Okay, so now I've kind of set this up now for the whole stereo mix. But what I can do is I can unlink the parameters. So every time I did something to the left, it did it to the right. And now if I switch this to mid side, all of my stuff is still there. So the changes that I just made are there. But what I want to do, because the way to make something sound better on the sides is to take some of the low frequency out of it, and that focuses the center a little bit more, and the bottom end will feel more mono and stronger. So I'm going to leave the changes I did to both sides, and I could tweak it some more, but I'm now mid side. So now this deals with the center channel, and this deals with the side channel. And what I can do is I can just roll off some of the low frequency on the sides, which should make things sound a little bit brighter and sparkly and a little bit more focused down the middle. So let's have a listen to that. You can hear the drums kind of coming into focus. So let's take it, a lot of people do it up like over 100, 120, 160, 180. Let's just leave it at 100 for this. And just for fun on the side, let's just add a teeny bit more of the sparkly stuff in the top. So you can hear in the claps that are happening, they just got a teeny bit brighter. Now, here's another super cool thing about this plugin. I have a harmonic distortion here, and I can play with that, and I can also adjust the stereo width, which is basically mixing between the mid and the side. So let's play with that a little bit. Let's try this harmonic distortion first. It's so subtle, you can hardly hear what it's doing, but okay, so let's go to extremes with the stereo width. So the backgrounds are super loud, and now we're very mono. So it's very powerful. So let's just err on the side of a little bit wider than usual, which is pretty cool. And let's go with that. And the harmonic distortion is a very subtle thing. I'm not hearing a whole lot of stuff here. But here's another thing that's cool about this plugin. I've got a solo for the mid and the side. So if we want to hear what's just in the mid, let's check that out. So that's just the mid. And now we can hear what's just on the sides. So that makes me want to bring my high pass up a little bit. So there's mid.
Whatever which way I go.
So it sounds really strong in the side and together. Sounds nice and wide. Okay, so this EQ is so good and so high quality and so amazing that if you're doing any actual mastering, I think you want it. Now, in the video, you saw that mastering engineer talk about his Shadow Hills compressor. Well, guess what? Not only is there a normal Shadow Hills compressor, which you can get from Universal Audio, and the UAD card and also Plug-in Alliance has a version of it, but this is a special Class A version, which is, there's very few of them in the world in hardware, and so they actually had an opportunity to actually emulate them. And they seem super intimidating and complicated when you first dig in here, but they're not too bad. Let me show you what's going on here. So it's basically two compressors. It's an optical compressor, for those of us that know about optical compressors. They're pretty gentle and slow and sort of pillowy, and they just sound kind of like a warm fuzzy blanket. We like them. And then there's a discrete compressor, which is a little bit harder and punchy, kind of like that API that we had in the last example. And so the cool thing about this is there's an optical section and a discrete section, and I can set up my meters here. So this meter is set so I can see what's happening on my optical compressor, and on this one I can see what's happening on my discrete compressor. So let's and then I've got some different transformer sounds and stuff, but let's just hear what's going on with this. Now you can hear it's already doing something. Springs everything forward. But let's actually take the discrete compressor out for now. So I've turned off the discrete section, so I've only got the optical compressor. And let me crank the threshold down so you can hear what this is doing. Super gentle, super slow. So we can see how much gain reduction we have here. And again, it's very, very transparent and wonderful sounding compression. So let's turn the optical off for a second. Let's turn the discrete on and let's hear what it's doing. So as you can hear, it's much more aggressive. So now with both, and off, and back on. Beautiful. Now I also have a stereo width thing here, which allows me, if I didn't quite get it on the EQ, I can make it wider here. But let's leave that for a second. This headroom control is just the greatest thing ever for me, and I'll show you what happens. When I turn up the headroom, notice that the compression goes away. So if I crank it up, it makes it have less compression, but if I crank it down, you can see I have way more compression. So the beautiful thing of this headroom control is that what it allows me to do is set up these two compressors working together the way that I like them. And then it's kind of like a more or less knob. It's pretty awesome. So if you're almost there, but you need to adjust it just a little bit, it's pretty fantastic because you can just subtly adjust it without having to adjust the thresholds of each compressor individually. So let's play with that control and get it happening. So I've got it at plus 0.4, which is just a little bit less than what I set, but I think that's pretty good. Okay, I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but this thing is the sweetener of all sweeteners, the Kush Hammer DSP. I think I introduced you to it in the last session. And this is just super wide bandwidth EQ. It's just so silky and wonderful, and has really useful EQ points. And this is just kind of the finishing polish on everything. So let's just have a listen to what this is doing. I'm going to add a little bit of top end and maybe a little bit of bottom end and a little bit of a mid scoop just to give it a subtle, beautiful thing. And the presets that are built into this are beautiful. So let's check it out. So clear. Oh. What a beautiful sound. And let's cut a little bit. Cut a little bit at 500. But this top end, like I could turn it up all the way and it's so sweet, it sounds so good. Okay, and then you've all seen this before. I think this thing is pretty great. And I use the compressor a lot, but for today, let's just like put it in here for volume and see what we get here.
Sunlight, blue skies from my plane. Free gift to me all last night. Since then I'm not the same. Hey go, whatever which way I go. Hey go, I'm looking here, baby, alone. Hey go, everything leads me back to you.
So just a beautiful, clean, open sound. So those are kind of three different approaches using different tools. Same approach with all of them, but just using different tools. And just for fun, let's have a listen to all of them back to back again one more time before we go. So here is the first one, which is frequency, compressor, and limiter.
Sunlight, blue skies from my plane.
Let's go to 2.
Free gift to me all last night. Since then I'm not the same. Hey go, whatever which way I go.
And let's go to 3.
Hey go, I'm looking here, baby, alone. Hey go, everything leads me back to you.
Anyway, I think that if you have headphones on and you're listening to these critically, you'll hear that the sound gets more and more close to a finished master as we went from 1 to 2 to 3. Pretty incredible technology that we have these days at our disposal. It doesn't look like there's any questions. So let me, if you have any questions about any of this, please send me an email. I look forward to seeing you all next month again for another edition of Steinberg Sessions, and hopefully we'll see you between now and then for a Yamaha 440 Sessions. Happy Thursday, and hope you have a great night.